Yes, hello, welcome. We are so happy to have you here at our first episode of Engaged In. We are going to get going. We know we may have a couple people joining us as we've gotten started. Thank you so much, and welcome to Engaged In, where educators, leaders, and innovators come together to explore student engagement from every angle. This series invites you to deepen your understanding, expand your toolkit, and make meaningful connections that drive impact. I'm Bridget Rieth. I'm an early literacy coach and Ignite engagement coordinator. My co-host is...
I am Sarah Wood, and I am one of the educational technology consultants. So just to take a look at what we are going to be covering in the hour that we are spending here together, just a note, and you probably heard when you entered the meeting that the session will be recorded today. So feel free after we send this out to encourage others to join our conversation, share out the video for today. So look for a follow-up email from us. And also I encourage you to liberally use the chat today. This is a chance not just to hear from us, but to also learn from each other. So feel free to use the chat to ask each other questions. I will drop the link into the chat as well, so you can access and follow along on our slide deck today. So we are going to go through first a little connector activity. I promise it won't be painful. And then we will give you some background knowledge about things, and we invite you to listen, think about how this translate into your own practice. And then at the end, we're going to share some information about how you can earn additional sketch credits. So with that being said, we are going to ask you in the chat to tell us who, if you have a 10-hour flight, where are you sitting and why? So in the chat, put your number and why you would choose to sit there. I'm loving the window seat, and it's at the front of the airplane. I'm impressed with Sonali wanting to sit next to Amelia Bedelia because I feel like that would be draining for me. And I just love how this is a great way to just share different personalities and what kind of energy you take from other people and what you thrive on. I know myself personally, I would pick number 10 because Roz is just sweet. And I think I could use the buffer in the aisle to maybe drown out Mrs. Frizzle because she would, I feel like, constantly be hitting me with facts and I would be overwhelmed. Bridget, who would you pick?
Yeah, I mean, I chose 10. A couple other people did. I had slightly different reasoning, though. First of all, I mean, Ms. Frizzle is my teacher idol from way back. And I also think that the 10-hour flight, she's probably going on vacation, which means she's going to appreciate a little downtime too. So we're going to get just enough Miss Frizzle, and then she's going to want to read a good book. And who wouldn't want to sit next to Roz? So.
And I'd also like to invite Kelli to the conversation if she would like to share as our guest speaker today. Who would you sit by on a 10-hour flight?
I picked either 1 or 6 because usually that's like the front row with the big seats, the big cozy seats and extra leg room. So I can usually get along with pretty much anybody. So
I would love for the stories to hear that you take away from sitting in number 6. So thank you everyone for sharing. And I love reading those in the chat. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely. So in episode 1, we are, of course, focused on student engagement, but we're going to be focused on student engagement in the entire series. So, why would we want to build a webinar series around student engagement? Well, you're going to hear a little bit about some of the work that's being done and has been done at Kent ISD, but this topic, this work, has been looked into for decades, quite frankly, half a century or more. We've got studies and studies and studies that helped us understand and refine what student engagement is and really the critical nature of us being able to understand it and impact it. All of these studies are linked on a slide. So if you're a research nerd, I know I am, I know Kelli is, feel free to grab that at some point and take a look at those. Some of these are really super early understandings. I mean, that first one was basically, hey, guess what? If students take notes, it actually helps their engagement and their recall. Oh, well, that was a good way to start. But of course, we've we've understood engagement to be multifaceted so much more over the years. And current research is certainly continuing to show on an even more refined level that it's not just about academic achievement, it's about social emotional well-being, it's about communal well-being, it's about so much additional beyond student learning. If it was only about student learning, it would certainly be worth it. But now that we know it has such a wide impact on students' lives, it's really important that we continue to pay attention and lean into this. And we're really excited that you're here to do that together with us. I think this quote kind of sums it up. If we had to try to put our arms around why are we going to do this work, I think that's a pretty good way to put it. We know we talk more now about behavioral, emotional, and cognitive impacts throughout student engagement. This was actually the study where some of that first came to our thinking frames. So I want you, this is research out there, but you've been doing research yourself in your own context. So this is adapted from Chalk Talk, which is part of Making Thinking Visible by Richard and colleagues. Only this one we're calling Talk or Chalk. You're going to make a choice between whether or not you would like to share verbally through coming on screen, or if you would like to place this into our Padlet. And we'd love for you to please respond one way or another. If you would like to respond in the Padlet, you have a QR code there to do that. We're going to ask you to briefly 2 to 4 sentences, briefly share an example of how you've seen student engagement or disengagement impact classroom learning. And what would be a key takeaway that you would offer to other educators because of this experience? Go over to the Padlet. We're going to give you about 4 or 5 minutes. Be thinking, be writing, and if you are a person who would like to do the talk instead of the chalk, we'll call on a few people in just a few moments. Let me go over to the Padlet so you can see what that looks like in case you're not there yet. If you are logged in as yourself, your name will come up. If you're not logged in, if you're just coming in as a guest, please make sure to add your name in there so that we know who added their story.
I also do love all the random names that it gives you, just like Google Docs says, you know, your anonymous axolotl or things like that.
Yeah, those are kind of fun too. If you truly want to remain anonymous, we would honor that choice as well. To summarize mine briefly, I just remember noticing the difference the year that I started to include student choice in with book club assignments. It was such an incredible difference on students' willingness to really do book clubs at all, let alone to engage their learning, their discussion groups. The more that I was able to put in the hands of the groups, and this was slowly over time for a learning process for me, but it was just a sea change in our classroom. All right, I see people that look like they are busily and concentratedly looking at their keyboards. Is there anyone who would like to do the talk part instead of the chalk part? Please, Sonali.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sonali Deshpande. I'm an early literacy coach at Kent ISD, and I'm a former first grade teacher. And I was reflecting on the times when I taught content that my students were really found engaging, were ones that they found relevant. So if it was something that they found interesting, they were interested in, they were more likely to ask questions and really deep thinking questions. Like sometimes I didn't know the answer to them. And so I would have to say, I don't know. I'm going to have to look that up. Or it would be a question that I hadn't considered myself. And so, I want to just highlight like relevance. If the topic is something that they're interested in, they're going to be more likely to stay with you and want to talk about it and ask questions.
Yeah, thank you, Sonali. It's amazing, isn't it? And I love it when and you're describing, I think you were a first grade teacher, if that's correct. It's either first or second. Just those little brains and the ways that they wonder where they can take topics.
I downloaded Padlet, but how do I write on it?
So There should be, are you on a computer or on your phone?
Oh, you can hear me. Oh man, sorry.
That's okay, I can help you.
I'm on. I was trying. I'm on my computer, and I downloaded Padlet. I've never used it before, so I don't know how to write on it.
Sure, welcome to it. There should be a little blue circle with a plus, and you're gonna
Yep.
push that, and that's gonna start you a place to write.
Okay, thank you. I
You
did it
bet.
before and it didn't come up. Thank you.
No worries. We're seeing examples on the Padlet of both noticing engagement and noticing disengagement, which we certainly, that's partly why we're here, right? Because we see both of those things. I wanted to make sure to make space for anybody else that wanted to share verbally.
I'm happy to share.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Stephanie. I I've noticed just in supporting different classrooms and teachers that when there are high levels of disengagement and kind of echoing what others have already stated is like the material is just perceived to be boring or it's a lot of listening. Um, just that there is a higher frequency or higher likelihood of disruptive behavior, which can affect the entire room and other students' learning. Um, and also like lengthy transitions. And then with adding in multimodal learning, that has been helpful because it gives kids of varying abilities the opportunity to respond and interact with the curriculum. Um, and I've seen the students remain on task and actively engaged for longer periods of time.
Yeah, thanks, Stephanie. You're really describing some effective instructional moves that you can put around students to be able to increase that. So I want you to know that you will have access to all of the things that we're going to co-create in these webinar series. So you will have ongoing access to be able to look at what some of your colleagues have experienced and be able to share and relate. And we'll talk more about that later. Right now, I'm very excited. Thank you so much for all of that. I'm going to go back to our presentation. We're going to bring in our guest. So Sarah, I'm going to let you do the honors of introducing our guest.
Yes, we are excited to kick off our webinar series for this year with inviting Kelli Campbell, who is the Director of Teaching and Learning, to kind of join us to kick off this conversation that we're doing around student engagement, as she has been a critical person in making and moving the student engagement work happen that's at Kent ISD. And we are looking to really move this work beyond Kent ISD and have it really support teachers across the county, across the state, wherever you might be joining from. And so we are excited to welcome Kelli to kind of talk about the work that we've been doing so far.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here today with you all. I'm honored because I am sharing on behalf of a larger committee that really did the heavy lifting of this work, and I get the privilege to share it with this group today. But really, it's representative of so many people, including Bridget, including Sarah, who are part of that committee that have done that work. So I'm just honored to be here. I say it's like when you run a race. I've never been a runner before until the last, I would say, 5 years or so. And it's that feeling when you're mid-race and you're like, what am I doing? And why did I do this? And then you can see you're getting towards the end. You can maybe even get a vision of the finish line and you're starting to get that motivation up again. What you'll notice on the slide here is just a very high level view of our timeline of our committee. So what Kent ISD did back in 2023 was we were really committed to wanting to increase and improve our student engagement supports. And so what we did is we pulled together a cross-departmental committee. So we've got representatives from various departments across Kent ISD, and we started leaning into the work. We wanted to research and learn even more what is going to move the needle. When I was first approached with this kind of focus of wanting to really increase and improve our student engagement supports as an ISD, one of the things that had just happened recently, I was in a district and they were doing some professional development, and I, was there and just supporting, and I had said, oh, and they said, we're doing student engagement PD, and they were doing some opportunities to respond training about how to increase student engagement in the classroom in terms of students' opportunities to respond. A lot of us still, at the time, a lot of them were still doing the raise the hand, call on students. And so they wanted to increase the opportunities for all the students to engage. And that's what that was it. That was going to be the student engagement PD. And they were like, we did it and we're good. Not that that's not perfect and helpful, but there's so many other facets to student engagement, which is what we learned on this journey. So one of the things, that you won't see in our work is a distinct definition of student engagement. Usually that's the number one thing when I show people our work and I talk about our work, is they say, well, how did you guys define it? Because they've likely caught on to the fact that research is riddled with various definitions. I think there was a research article I was reading recently that said something like they analyzed research from 1985 to 2008, and they found 19 different operating definitions just within that little chunk of research. And so the one thing that we did not do, so we did not define, but what we did find is there's a very strong consensus throughout the research that student engagement is multidimensional, it's interrelated. There's so many different levers that impact and influence a student's level of engagement. And so that is one thing that we really grasped, and we said, okay, if that's the strong consensus, that there's these various things that play multi-dimensions, all interrelated and impacting, let's turn our focus less on agreeing on a definition and more on what are those actionable areas that we can lean into. And so what we did is we launched our committee into doing thorough research, analyzing data, and we identified and lifted up key themes that we kept seeing that throughout the data and throughout the research that we were examining. And what was really innovative, or that I was really proud of our team for doing, was we didn't just stop there and say, okay, we found these, key things. We said, now let's inject student voice into it. And so we said, so this is what research says. This is what the collective data says around how to impact student engagement. And what we said is, but what do our students say? And so we used things like the Kent County, like my student data, survey data. We used focus groups. We launched focus groups. We went out to districts and talked to small groups of students and asked them questions to get their input. And then what we did is we took their voice, we looked at our research, and we took their voice to amplify what we will now refer to as our accelerators. So these are the key themes that we realized throughout research that had the biggest impact or the biggest propensity to accelerate student engagement. So we're just going to pause for a second. One of the things I want to do is, we kind of just talked a little bit about where we've been and whatnot. Bridget, if you could go back just one slide. The one thing I hope you'll take away just from that segment is the intentionality around we injected student voice. We really leaned on the student voice to amplify the themes that we noticed. And so what I'm hoping as a key action, one of the things that's always really helpful in a webinar or a professional learning is now what? So I have all this information, new learning, what can I do with it? One of the things I would really lean into is how can you inject your own student voice into the learning from today? And so what does that look like? That looks like going back, whether you are a classroom teacher, are you a building administrator? You could do it from a district lens, a building lens, classroom lens, but what does your data say? So could you look at your own data that might exist? Maybe your district gives the My Student Data survey, and you could lean into what does that data say? Maybe you're building or you have classroom data around climate culture. If you have any type of individual data that your students maybe take surveys, things like that, you could look at things like attendance data, behavioral data, what picture does your data present when you are looking at student engagement? What is available to you? What already exists? And then from there, you can lean in to say, well, what data do I need? Is there additional data? If the idea of talking with groups, focus groups, we linked a resource there, our focus group template. This is the template that we used when we sent teams out to talk with students. That's a great template if you want to take it, modify it. Those are the questions that we asked students and got amazing feedback, more insight than I think we ever thought we would get. It was great. So that's there. The other thing too is sometimes people think like, oh, I've got to go out and do this. I got to survey every student, or I have to look at all of this data. The second link there, that is, and just a couple of examples of data that Bob Marzano, he's co-authored the Marzano teacher evaluation rubric. Some people are familiar with him in that realm. But this is just a couple of quick ways that you can gather data, just quick little sample size data. So you could do just an observation. You could just observe student behavior, maybe in a colleague's class or in the hallway, or just during the first 5 minutes of your class, or the middle 5 minutes of a class, and record. What did you see? What are you noticing? And then another example here was to have quick conversations. Just every single day you commit to talking to 2 or 3 students. Choose what you want to talk to them about, and you could have a quick conversation there. And then, I had those flipped. The conversations one's at the top and the observation one's there at the bottom. But it's the idea that when we oftentimes think about collecting data, we don't have to collect data from every single student. It could be small sample sizes of data to help inform and paint our larger picture. The only caveat I will say to that is before you do any type of surveying, I know a lot of districts have policies and procedures around when you're allowed to actually give a formal survey. And so just want to make sure that you seek the necessary permissions if you do decide to, get some additional data on your own. But use your student voice, layer it. Everything that you learn here today, I would just encourage you to then say, okay, I learned all this stuff today, or at other PDs, what does my student data say? What does their voice say in terms of where should I be leaning in? So that was just the one takeaway there. But without further ado, we will get to the accelerators. So this is the culmination of the work of the one-to-one to the Student Engagement Committee here at Kent ISD. And I just want to give you a few minutes to really lean in and just review the document. The link is in the agenda, I believe, ladies. I'm not sure where you guys have that link. But we just want to give you, about 5 minutes to really just look through the accelerators, look through the different descriptors there. And then as you're doing that, just take note of any noticings or wonderings that you might be having around the accelerators. And we would like you to enter those into the chat. I'm noticing, I'm wondering. If you want to put those in the chat, that would be great. We're just going to give you a few minutes. I'm going to stop talking and just let you have some time to just lean into what are the accelerators, and we'll go from there. Any questions? Okay.
Sorry, my arrow finger got really excited there. I'm going to scan back. I'm going to go back to the accelerator so that you have that on the screen. I did also send that to you in the email, so you've got a link to that if you would like to have that on an additional tab in your computer.
Okay. I really appreciate all the comments in the chat. I love reading through them. Is there anybody that wanted to just expand a little bit on what you put in the chat? I know one of the comments in the chat that was standing out to me is the infographic. There's a lot of information. I know at first when we were talking about just how the webinar was going to go today, one of the things we talked about is really giving, is 5 minutes enough? There's so much content into this one graphic. And so it is a lot of information. And the idea is not that you do all of the, like, focus in on all of these things all at once. But how could you, like, where do you start? It's that, where do I lean in? Where do I start? And kind of going back to that key action from, just the slide before, one of the things, that you could do is where does your data point you, or where might students give you some voice in terms of leaning in on where that next step is. Beginning of the year, the timeline, someone made a really good point too about, it's the beginning of the year. So really leaning into that climate and culture. Sometimes these have a natural place in the flow of our school year. That climate culture, we're establishing classroom management expectations and procedures at the beginning of the year. So some of them might be a natural place to lean into, and pair that also with data might be another opportunity to do that. I know one of the things that we were going to do is, Sarah, are you ready for us? Okay. Sarah is taking the next slide. Sarah, do you want to just talk a little bit about what you're going to be sharing?
Yes, sure. So Bridget is pulling up the updated slide deck. And if you're following along, it is slide 16 that I'm on. I took all of the things that you just commented in the chat, and really to kind of analyze that data as far as our noticings and wonderings and some key findings of what we're thinking about those student accelerators. So we're kind of going off script here. We didn't know what was going to be here. So it's interesting for us to see what kind of we were able to see where the group was thinking about this. And with full disclosure, this was done with Gemini. And I did put the prompt that I used down at the bottom. So if you are like, wow, that's a great way to analyze data and pull information really quickly and summarize it, just copy that prompt that I used there and add your own data points below, and you can pull out some things similar to what we had here.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Again, really appreciating the feedback that you all gave to help inform. This is just a summary of our thoughts here, but what you can see is a lot of the things that we were just talking about. And I'm hoping that throughout this webinar series, as you lean into the different areas with that student engagement lens, that you'll be able to continue to pull strategies and resources that can help address those wonderings, and that can help empower you to walk away with at least somewhat of a next step in knowing where to go for some resources and strategies. So I appreciate you sharing that and doing that for us, Sarah. Thank you. One of the things that we know when we do come across new learning, whether it's in a professional learning session or it's a resource that we thought a handle on, is we're all really busy. Educators are very, very busy people. And I know I've left my fair share of professional learning as a teacher with great intentions to do a lot of things. But what I didn't do was I was not intentional about how I was going to embrace that new learning. And unfortunately, the busier you are, the more intentional you have to be. Love that photo. I also have 4 children, so I would probably gladly paint myself into a corner at some point. So what do I mean by leaning in with intentionality? So one of the other things that I'm hoping that you will think about as you leave today is not only using your data to identify like what are you doing really well. If you were to look at those accelerators and you were to identify like, hey, I think I'm doing really well. My classroom management is on point, and my I've got really great relationships with my students. Great. Does your data support that? Does your data also say that same thing? But then leaning in, where can I grow? Maybe I don't have data in some areas. That could be a growth. Or maybe my data shows that I need to do lean in. Maybe it's instructional moves or what areas. So just taking a little self-assessment to determine where you might want to lean in. And then what structures and resources or processes are you going to use to ensure your intentionality? So what I mean by that is, for example, if you wanted to ask your students, I was a high school math teacher, so that's where my brain always goes to for examples. But maybe I'm going to think, gosh, I don't know. I don't think I have very much data. I might take that focus group template and I might take one of those questions and I might use that as my opener for the week. I might grab one of those questions and that's going to be my connector for the week with my students. And I'm going to use that as a listening tour. I might do some of those Marzano quick data forms to be able to just check off, what did I hear? And then use that as some data. That might be my next thing, but that's never going to happen if I don't go right in and schedule that into my lesson plans or do, something like that. So Sarah just put a poll up in our Zoom that which area, those were the 5 areas of our accelerators. Which ones do you feel really like you're doing really well? And we're just going to do a quick poll if you don't mind. Great. And then the other example there, if you wanted to lean in to one of the other accelerators, and you're just, when am I going to do that? How am I going to hold myself accountable? Maybe I want to be sure that I'm connecting relationally and I don't go right into my content area. Then I want to, or if I want to make sure that students have choice, I might go through and make a note in my, lesson planning resource, whatever that is, that says, okay, it prompts me to ask me a question every single time. How did I include student choice? How did I include student choice? So those are just a couple of examples. Bridget can share another one. We had a team that launched our student engagement symposium this past June that leaned into the accelerators. And one of the things they did was they coded all of the areas where the accelerators showed up. So I'll let you talk a little bit about what that looked like for your team.
Thanks. I have a very lively professional learning session going on just on the other side of a movable wall. So I'm hoping that, if you get some of that enthusiasm that they're sharing, that all the better. We really wanted to be intentional about making sure that if we are talking about the student accelerators or the engagement accelerators, that we were walking the walk as well. And so as we moved through our day in our planning, we were making sure that we were adding not just a little bit, but that we were covering all of the accelerators at some point. That doesn't mean it was all happening all at the same time, but we just went ahead and used the little icons that are on the graphic. And as we went through our planning, doesn't work, there we go. We grabbed those and we put on each slide an icon or more that said, what were we doing here? We did a connector where we're asking a bunch of questions and having people give information about themselves. We had 75 people in the room, most of whom who hadn't met each other. So we wanted to build those relationships so that we could have constructive dialogue throughout the day. So that was a relationship builder. Our stop and think was an instructional move to get that student voice in. We wanted to make sure that every time we were reaching out and giving some information, we were also asking people to look inside and connect it with their own experiences. So learner-centered and voice. Our stop and think and our turn and talk is again that voice, making sure that lots of people get to speak and in the ways that are meaningful for them. One of our instructional moves throughout the day, we were using a mind map that we would continue to return to so that people could build their understandings and be reflective about how their ideas were changing or expanding through the day. A driving question board led by our science consultant, Wendy Vogel, really touched upon multiple things. Creating a safe environment, bringing in everyone's voice. We asked people to come up with what are your driving questions around engagement, and then we took that and turned those into some talk rooms, some discussion rooms where people could self-select to sit in and talk about the topics that were most meaningful to them, gathering all of that information. So you can do the same sort of thing with your lesson plan, a single lesson plan, with your day, with your week, and be looking into where am I inserting and elevating those accelerators and what doesn't seem to be showing up.
Thank you, Bridget. I was working with secondary high school staff who were really leaning into improving relationships. So a lot of data had showed the staff that their student-teacher relationships were just really struggling, not with all students, but across the board. There just seemed to be a disjoint in in that area. And so all the staff, we were committed to improving our relationships with our students. But some of the teachers were really struggling, myself included. I was a high school math teacher at one point, then high school principal. So I can see this idea of I have over 100+ students that I see every single day, potentially, depending on your course load. But how can I realistically have strong relationships with all of those students? Is that even realistic? Is it even possible? So just lots of questioning about, like, I'm showing up, I want to be here, I want to improve my relationships with my students, but across the board, how do I do that with 100+ students? The note there, thank you for the graphic, Sarah. I'm not sure if that was you that put that in there. That is a week tie. Is that an AI graphic? No, that's something you made. Awesome.
That's a Sarah Wood original.
A week tie. What is a week tie? So first, before I get into it, a week tie, it's like an acquaintance. It's someone that you have a certain level of familiarity with. Think the barista at the coffee shop where you always get coffee, or the bus driver on the bus that you take to school or work every day. These are people that you might pass in the hallway or see or have minimal interaction with. These are not people that you have close relationships. You're not going to call these people and go out for coffee and share the deepest, darkest secrets of your life. These are just acquaintances. If they're strangers, these might be people that you had a impromptu conversation with. So now they're no longer a stranger. And so that's how weak tie is loosely defined. And there was a study in 2014, and it was building off of another study from 1973, where the conclusion was that for every weak tie interaction that a student experienced, the student experienced a reliable increase in happiness and sense of belonging, an overall positive mood affect increase. And so what that means, and the interesting piece of this was it had nothing to do. This was independent of the students' proclaimed close relationships, so strong relationships. So this is anything that a student, students that have very close relationships with people, some students that had none. The data was independent of that the more weak tie interactions that a student experienced, the higher their happiness, their positive overall mood, and their sense of belonging went up. Why do I bring this up? Why does this matter? If I'm working with secondary teacher, or I am a secondary teacher, and I'm overwhelmed by this idea of having to cultivate a deep relationship with 100+ students, weak ties are things that I can absolutely do. If I'm in the hallway during passing time, I can smile at students. That's a weak tie interaction. I can say hello. I can greet them. I can, and that's all staff. You could really empower all of your staff that for every interaction that a student had, there was a significant increase in their overall sense of belonging and happiness. And so that feels like a realistic thing that we could all commit to and do to help encourage that belonging. And I bring that up to kind of bring us to our third key action, and that's the continued learning piece. Already lots of, in the chat and in the different feedbacks y'all have offered is like, what can I do? I want some strategies. I've acknowledged and maybe where you want to lean into in terms of what accelerator. And so as you start to do that, we've got some generated strategies and protocols there that we shared with our student engagement symposium this past summer. We've got some additional resources and research. Those are just jumping off points for you to start leaning into. The other thing I would just share is that your learning doesn't have to be this very official space. It could be that just like that information I just shared with you about weak ties, I heard that on a podcast. I just a random podcast that I was listening to. I knew I was working with a group that was focusing on relationships. And ever since I've worked with them, I've stayed tuned into some of the key relationship podcasts, and that was on. And I was like, oh, that's fantastic. We can do that. We can lean in, we can be mindful. What I love about it is you could even take it a step further and empower students. You could teach them about the power of a weak tie and how important it is for you to smile at your peers and say hello and just have those interactions because they are meaningful. And so your continued learning doesn't have to be a formal PD. It can be podcasts, it could be research articles, it could be any of the items listed here. The other thing that's really informative is if there are teachers in your district that are just kind of really great at cultivating relationships. If you can figure it out, job shadow them, go in and audit a class, watch how they interact with their students, what kinds of things do they do to cultivate that relationship. All of those things can be really important. And then lastly, again, that was action number 4. Sorry, Bridget, was just how do you empower students to improve their own engagement? Just like we're working and sharing all of these strategies and resources with you, how could you teach students about engagement themselves? How do we teach them about what it's like, have them learn how to recognize when they're engaged and when they're disengaged? How do we give them strategies and tools so how they can re-engage? Sometimes we forget that they're part of this learning process. And so I think teaching them, empowering them can be powerful as well. So I'm running out of time, so I want to stop and see if there's any questions. Okay.
You just nailed everything there, Kelli.
This is a very short period of time.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, Kelli, we really appreciate your time today and energy and for the leadership that you have shown in moving this work forward. And we are so excited I mean, this feels like the tip of the iceberg. It really does. There's no way. I agree with the several comments. You can't look at that and just go, great, I'm going to do all of that tomorrow. This is a long journey, but it's very well worth it. So as we move forward to claim the sketch credit for attending tonight's meeting, you are going to be able to use this QR code here. There's a bit.ly that works as well. If that works better for you, there will be a Google form that you will fill out. If you look at that submissions by May 29th, and that feels a little ridiculous, it feels a little weird for us to look at right now, but this is meant to be something that people can go back to. We anticipate that there will be people that are using the recorded versions of these. If you have colleagues, friends, neighbors, loved ones that you think would benefit from this registration is going to stay open so that people can come in and join us, and then they will be able to retroactively go back and do that. So we will make sure that you get your exit ticket also via email after the session tonight. But of course, I'm hoping many of you are just doing it right now. I wouldn't recommend that you wait until May 29th. That might be a little harder to answer some of those questions. But we want to make sure that you have an opportunity not only to get that sketch credit for today, but to, Sarah, tell them about how they can double down.
Absolutely. Took me a second because I was putting the link in the chat.
Yeah, thank you.
So with this webinar series, we realized that it's important to not only hear the information, but we know that it's great to hear it, but sometimes it doesn't really fully make sense until we have a chance to try it. And so this is what we're introducing here as an opportunity to double down with an application of your learning. So if there was something that was shared this evening that Kelli was presenting to us where you're like, man, that really hits. I would love to try this tomorrow. I can do a week tie thing. That's a quick thing I can try. Feel free to engage in our double down, where you can then receive an additional sketch credit. So that's kind of 1 hour's worth of work that just kind of reflect on your experience, share what you did. It is like Bridget mentioned for the exit ticket, it is a Google form, and it also has the same May deadline, which seems really odd to say, but we don't want to rush you through this. We know that change is not going to happen overnight. And you might progressively try something, and maybe Kelli shares something with you this time, and then you listen to another webinar and you're like, oh man, I see a connection. You can do the double down after that. There is no time frame on that other than that final date that was listed previously.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. It could be anything that Kelli talked about, but also there's a lot of resources in there that you're going to have access to. So if you tap into one of those resources and decide that that would be something useful to you, you might as well get the extra sketch credit and come on back and double down. So we'll make those available to you so that whenever that happens, that you can maximize that. Please reach out and contact us at any point. Both Sarah and I have a few things on the burners right now that are engagement focused. We are also working within our learning stream system to be tagging things that are specific to this engagement work. So please stay tuned for that as we figure out what's the best way for people to what's the word I'm looking for? To identify and really target in areas that you would like to work on. These are some, I have a couple of book studies going on. There's some people here that are involved in those. We are, Sonali Deshpande, who's also on the webinar, and I are engaged in a study this year looking at how we can take community partnerships and elevate them to support literacy engagement. We're really excited to do some research and learn a little more about that. And Sarah, oh my gosh, so many things.
I know, living and breathing AI over here. We do have an AI for Educators workshop coming up that our EdTech team is putting on, and it starts next week. And it's a 2-day in-person workshop with some, I hate to say it, homework in between, but gives you a chance to actually put your learning into action. And we've seen a lot of amazing things that have come out of that. This is actually our third cohort. Our Pathways to AI cohorts, we just wrapped up our cohort 1 at the end of August. And those are going through and earning some of those badges and certifications from tools. Like sometimes you'll see, become a certified educator in this. It's going through and doing those courses that are already there. And then we give you sketch credit for it. So that's really nice. And then EdTech Cheer is an annual EdTech professional learning. I leave it very open because it's a very responsive professional learning based on what we're hearing from educators. And surprise, surprise, it's about AI this year. But the twist on it is it's taking those student engagement accelerators that we've talked about and how AI fits in with student engagement. And then if you are curious as to what is coming up in the rest of our Engaged In series, we have that listed here for you. And I can't remember if Bridget kind of explained this at the beginning, but this is you pick what you need for your professional learning. I mean, obviously, we'd love for you to come to all of these, but we also understand and respect your time, but really encourage you to do some perspective bending and look at something that might not normally be in your wheelhouse, because there are a lot of strategies and resources that are going to be shared throughout this webinar series that will be really helpful regardless of your content area.
Yeah, exactly, Sarah. Today, we did an introduction of all of the accelerators, but each of these episodes will lean into one or two that are particularly pertinent for the work that the guest is engaged in. So we hope that you will come on back. Also, please feel free to reach out at any point to myself, to Sarah, and of course to Kelli. Thank you again to Kelli for being here. We will be on here for a few more minutes. So if you have some lingering questions or wanted to maybe ask a question but not do it in the whole group, feel free to stay on. Thank you so much for your attendance. This has been a lot of fun. I promise that my clicking finger will get better. I learned a lot of things about my computer tonight, so that's good.